All right, well, let's just carry on. And the next thing we're going to talk about is collections. So we're going to talk about credit control and debt collector. So using credit control uh, is the best way to manage your collections within NorthStar. But the key to the maximizing the functionality is to make sure it's run on time and that it's run consistently. Taking advantage of debt collector allows users to focus collections on a specific group of accounts and even allows you to produce required documentation for any outside collection agencies. So starting with some setups, excuse me, the control table setting in the credit letter tab. So this section is set up with it to configure the number of days between the due date and the notice level date. So this is used for auto load as it relies heavily on the date. So in this example, we've got level 1 overdue to reminder as 7 days. Level 2 is set at 14 days, and level 3 is set at 33 days. And there's also additional configurations available for final accounts and for remote accounts as well. All right, so another setup that you is the credit control batch IDs. And typically these just need to be set up one time. Uh, the only time they would need to be modified would be if your collection policies have changed. Um, so it's helpful to create a meaningful batch ID for the description because this will help users select the correct batch type with the correct defaults. For example, like a 30-day notice or disconnection, it's pretty easily identifiable. So the levels in the batch ID, the levels are set with wiser ends depending on the requirement. Minimum balance can be set, as well as specifying active or finalized accounts. And yeah, as I mentioned, once these have been set up, and usually only needs to be one time, it's quite easy for the user to go in and say, well, like I'm doing 60-day notices, I'm doing finals, and just easily choose the correct defaults for that batch that's being processed. All right, so there's two methods to loading accounts in credit control, and that is auto load and aging load. So both methods provide multiple criteria for loading accounts. The main difference is that auto load relies on the notice level dates in service details, and the aging load allows the accounts to be loaded based on the number of days past due. And for aging load, there's no prerequisite for an account to be eligible to load. All right, so auto load, the batch criteria, um, process date is your main date that this being processed. You can future date it. You can also backdate it if need be. Minimum balance is set. The level flags should reflect the level that's being loaded. You can also load for multiple levels at one time, but typically we see level 1, level 2, level 3 being processed individually. The load can look for actives or finals or both. So in this example, the load would be looking for any level 1 accounts that had a minimum balance of $25 as of March 1st, 2024. So each of these fields can be populated in the batch header by the user choosing the appropriate batch ID, but it can also be done manually as well. All right, so starting with auto load, there are lots of options to choose from as filters. So some common filters include cycle, root, account, owner, tenant, category, etc. You even have the option to drill down into service, bill code, credit rating, if you would like. All right, so the program parameters in the auto load screen. So the force current bill option. So sometimes you might want to force the current bill. So the load is force current bill will force the load to look at that top line in notice levels instead of the last line, instead of the bottom line. So an example would be you would use this option to collect on the most recent bill as it's overdue, but you haven't created a new bill yet. So therefore, it hasn't pushed over into that overdue bucket yet. So another option to use is the promise to pay accounts. So if you want to consider promised funds, you would select this option. So that means if there's promised funds on the account that will cover the debt, the account will not load when you've selected this box. And of course, there is a program key value required, which is promise to pay if you do use promised funds. Yeah, yeah, promised funds, you can set up, a lot of times there are like assistance programs, things like that, that can be set up as promised funds, and there are typically qualifiers, eligibility requirements that need to be met. But if you are interested in learning more about the promised funds, I believe there is some documentation available on that. Yeah. So does your oh, you guys aren't live yet, right? Right. Okay. But from being included in credit control, yeah. Yeah. Wow. Oh, wow.
And so you said the government wants to make it permanent?
Future. Yeah. Hmm. Right, because they think it's that credit. It's a credit on their account that they're entitled to. Yeah. Wow.
They were to start. Yeah, but we'll see how that all goes down.
Right. Ah, okay. So yeah, right. So I think that you may want to look at setting up some promise funds on the account. So let's say you get, I don't know, $1,000, and the bill, that credit, that credit amount of $1,000 is not just going to be applied to the AR. It sits in promise fund and then gets applied each month, each time a bill is processed. Um, so so that they're not carrying a constant credit balance. That's right. That's right. It's sort of setting, it's there, but it's in its own little module. Kind of like an arrangement, that is insane. That is a lot, right? Might want to, right? Yeah. You might want to look at doing that for sure. I'm going to just make a note for myself. I'm going to get some more information for you guys on this. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I'll just make a note. So then what happens when the account is final? You know? Okay. And they accept that back? Really? So they're just sitting there. Yeah. Yeah. Have a great Christmas party. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, I've made a note and get some more information on it. I'll reach out to you guys for sure. And you said you were gonna log a ticket, right, about the deposit? Okay. Okay. All right. So, it was great having a little conversation, finding out what everybody's doing and how everybody's handling this stuff. Um, So just going through some of the options in the auto payment, or sorry, in the auto load when it comes to payment arrangements. So you do have several options available. So option yes is to reduce the balance owing by any payment arrangement before considering that minimum balance test and loading the account. So option B is reduce balance owing by any balance payment arrangement, whereas Y will apply to all types, whether it's balance or whether it's invoice or whether it's deposit. So D will reduce balance owing by any deposit arrangement that's in good standing. E instructs the load to skip all accounts with an arrangement, regardless of the status, regardless if they're behind or what. And N is don't even look at payment arrangements when you're running that. I want to include accounts that have payment arrangements. All right. So if you are collecting the deposit that is required on the account, you will want to check the box, include deposit to collect. So there is a PKV required for this if you are doing that. Alert codes, so you can use this section to actually load accounts where credit control exempt alerts have expired. And so you can load by the code or you can load by the end date of that alert code. So wouldn't be NorthStar if there wasn't program key values to consider, as always. So these are some that you may want to look at for your credit control process. So including CCR load deposit required if you are collecting on that. CC disk flag test. So this will load accounts that are already disconnected. CCR always gen disk. So if you want to always generate disconnect, even if it's already disconnected, we've also got some to load accounts that have a scheduled final bill request. If you want to ignore all charges assessed after the last bill, if you want to include a grace period as well, and then the promise to pay, which we were just talking about as well. All right, so aging load. So aging load works well for certain types of accounts, such as finals or accounts that have been billed before the collections have been completed on the existing notice levels. So 1 to 3. So the batch header levels, they must be set with the A, not the Y. The So again, the defaults can be set by configuring the batch IDs for the batch types. If you use aging load, when we looked at batch IDs at the beginning, you can also set these up for, aging load. You're going to have A's in your flags instead of your Y's or N, or instead of your Y's, I should say, pardon me. So the load process is still going to look at what is set up in the header information and then load any eligible accounts that meet all the criteria. All right, so on the aging load tab, so the user is going to select the notice level that they want to load for. In this example, the accounts are being loaded for a notice level 3 and with the days past due of 33. So when this is posted, it will update the corresponding notice level flag and service details with an A. And just a note in regards to the days past due, that default, that can be changed, but it does default to the level 3 setting in the control table, but it can be overwritten. So in the control table settings that we looked at the beginning, that's where that is populating from the default. Okay, so there are similar filter options available for the aging load as there are for the auto load. The common parameters, again, cycle, route, tenants, owners can be selected. And also have some options to include promise to pay accounts, include payment arrangements, and alert codes, again, like we looked at. So you can load accounts where the credit control exempt alerts have now expired. And just a note on the payment arrangements in the aging load, you don't have all the options that you do in the auto load. The auto load, we saw we had Y, N, B, D, etc. In the aging load, you either include them or you don't. That's it. So some PKVs you might want to consider. So age by bucket. This ages the account by billing journal, not the actual number of days. So the value should be set with the number of buckets to age. So example, like 1 to 4, basically. Another one you may want to look at is level check in age by buck. So for this one, when the value is set to 1, the account won't load unless the previous levels have been loaded. So that is more similar to what the aging load does. Aging load's not going to load for level 2 if a level 1 hasn't been run. If you want aging load to behave the same way, you can use this program key value for that. All right, so now one option that is available for criteria in both the auto load and the aging load is the credit rating. And this sort of ties in with what we saw earlier as well. So having the credit events configured in NorthStar will, of course, impact the credit rating on the accounts. This can be a real time saver and require less manual review of the accounts. In order to use credit rating as part of the load criteria, credit events need to be configured. Scores and duration are assigned to each event. The credit rate limit defines the different credit rates and the maximum allowable score. And when you have a new account, it starts with a rating of Z, but it updates to an A once the first bill has been processed on the account. All right, credit rating details can be viewed in Account Gateway in the Credit Scoring tab. So customers who have had a bad payment history or who have had a number of credit events assigned to them will reflect a poor credit rating. And the credit rating can actually be used as load criteria in multiple journals. So not just credit control and deposit review, we can also use this in write-off, in refund, in late payment, overdue interest. So it is a useful option to have. All right, so back to credit control. Once the batch is loaded, the exceptions edit tab displays accounts that didn't load and the reasons why. So maybe because the minimum balance wasn't exceeded or the previous level was not processed in the case of auto load. The exceptions report will provide you a list of the accounts so that you can investigate, and you can print this report out for further review. Reassess batch function. So when users want to capture any payments that have been made, they can run the reassess batch. The batch type should always match the original header. So if you've loaded with auto load, you want to use your reassess with your auto load reassess. Checking the apply payments box will remove accounts from the batch that have paid in full, or reduce the balance that loaded in credit control for customers who have made partial payments. If left unchecked, this will only print a list for users to review, which I believe Diane mentioned earlier. Use the existing level, so ensure this is checked if you want to reassess with the original batch levels. And again, a report is available for review. All right, so on the print tab, you have 3 additional tabs: arrears listing, letter print, and notice print. Arrears listing, so you would select how you want the report to be ordered and the account status, active or final. And the report will show you the details of the batch, like which levels were selected, what the process date is, the accounts that have been loaded into the batch, how much, what's overdue, and important dates. On the letter print tab, you run through the process of creating and printing a letter, the same as you do in other sections within NorthStar. To start, you will create the letter, choosing the criteria required if you need it, but the only required field is for the letter itself. So once the letter is created, you will move to the print tab, choose the letter again, and press OK to create that mail merge. So you can also choose to create a notice, which often replaces the need for a letter. So usually utilities, they do one or the other. They do letters or they do notices. So that's, again, something that's sort of configured at the beginning. So if you are running a notice, you can run it in-house or create a flat file that would typically go out to a third-party vendor for printing. So disconnects, the disconnects tab, generate disconnects. So you can select any criteria that fit your situation. So you're going to choose your, oh, hang on, sorry. There we go. All right. Okay, so generating disconnects. You're going to choose your scheduled date. You're going to click OK. You're going to get the pop-up and select a call type. So once you press OK, a service order gets created on the account immediately, and the note field in the call maintenance table does note the credit control batch number that that order was created in. So if you want to assign disconnect or collection charges, you can do so right from the load disconnect charges tab. So start with the AR description. If you've already created an extra charge journal and you want to include it, you would just select the merge with batch number. Otherwise, if you leave it blank, it's just going to create a new extra charge. So the charges that are set up for the disconnect charges, you would actually, these charges would be set up under the service type in the collection charge field. So when you send load disconnect charges to an extra charge journal from credit control, that's where it's pulling that amount from, is the service type and that collection charge field. So once that's done, you can go find your extra charge journal and process as you normally would. So assign post tab. One option is to assign to debt collector. So for an example, you would typically see this if the batch was finaled accounts that have maybe been deemed uncollectible. And assigning to debt collector in credit control doesn't actually write off the balance, but it does create a credit event. The event filter box allows the user to attach a particular credit event to the account when it's being assigned to debt collector. So again, we can choose alerts to assign from this batch. The event filter can be checked if you want to attach a particular credit event to the account. And then of course, the post tab will of course post the batch, and that is what will update the notice level flags and dates in service details. All right, so we do get a lot of questions about why accounts have not loaded into credit control. So we're going to go through a little bit of troubleshooting. So first off, if an account is on PAP, by default, it will not load into credit control unless the program key value allow PAP accounts is set. Another reason could be in service details, the account may have an exempt flag set on notices. So Another reason is, well, check your processing date of your batch and compare it to the date field for the level that you're loading. If the processing date of your batch is before the date of that level in service details, the account won't load. For auto load, I think we sort of discussed this too. If the previous level has not been processed yet, the account's not going to load for a level 2 if a level 1 hasn't been processed, and it's not going to load for level 3 if level 2 hasn't been processed. Some other reasons that that can cause this, maybe the account is exempt from disconnect and they did not load in your disconnect batch. So if the disconnect box in service details in the exemption section is checked, it will not load. And just a note on the date field beside this box, this is actually the expiry date of an exemption. So if you see disconnect and it's set to April 30th, that is the expiry date for that disconnection exemption for that account. Check if the account has an alert set up on it. Alerts can be set up to be exempt from credit control. In alert code maintenance, on the CC exempt level tab, is where we can configure alerts to be exempt from credit control. So maybe the account has one of these alerts on it and that's why it didn't load. All right, some other reasons why the account may not have loaded. If you selected promised funds or payment arrangements, check to see if they have promised funds or payment arrangements on hand. If there's a pending payment that will cover the balance, then the account won't load into credit control either. So check the balance on the account and you can compare that to the minimum balance on your credit control batch. And if it doesn't meet that requirement, it's not going to load. And then finally, we do see this from time to time, is sometimes records get orphaned in credit control. So therefore, they won't load into a new credit control batch. So the best practice for this is if you have to delete a credit control batch, always use the clear batch button first. And this will purge the accounts out of the batch before actually deleting your batch header. So that can help avoid or orphan records. Oh, yeah.
So as I stated this morning, I'm still fairly new to all of NorthStar, but I do find with credit control, when we're running, say, notices, 48 notices, for example, we will run the batch when we are prepping to do our calls 1 week before the notices go out. Oftentimes, our leads will go in there, they're running late fees, other things like that. They'll clear the batches, but when we go back in to do the actual notices, they almost will never automatically load. They'll load the first time around, but after we clear the batch, for some reason, we're having to manually enter them one at a time by their account number, because trying to pull with the cycle, it will not load.
So by chance, has another bill been processed by then?
Oftentimes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. So that has pushed that down.
So is there any way around that, or are we just,
So yeah, when you can actually leave your batch there. You don't need to delete it, and you can just use the reassess function. And so using you're creating the batch, if you need to have the process date in the future, if you're looking at like a week out, you can set it, you can future date that, load the accounts, um, then run your reassess right before you need to proceed with your next step, your notices, or your disconnects, instead of deleting.
clearing the batch?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
for example, if say Angela has to do something with billing and someone who's on my list is also going to be on her list, is she going to be able to pull that account even if it's on my credit control batch?
So are you asking, can she process bills
Is it gonna-
if it's in credit control?
Correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Okay. Mhm. Okay, because you want that included in the load then, right? You want those late fees included? Mm-hmm. Right, right. Okay. Let's connect after and we can talk some more about that. Does that sound good? Yeah. Okay, perfect. All right. Okay, so debt collector. So once an account has been assigned to debt collector, it will appear in the details active tab. The inactive tab does display accounts that were previously assigned to debt collector but have been removed. The CSV tab will allow the user to export the data for a particular debt collector. And this can be very useful for either internal collections or even an outside collection agency. The print tab will produce a listing of all accounts that are still active with that debt collector. This is typically text or PDF format. The transfer tab will allow accounts to be transferred from one debt collector to another. So for example, if you've got, an internal one set up where you're trying to collect internally, and then you're transferring this account to outside collection agency because you guys cannot collect on it, you can use this tab to easily do so. So there is a debt collector template. So if you do decide to send uncollectible accounts to an outside collection agency, they typically want the data in a certain format. So the debt collector template allows the output file to be customized for those required specifications. So you would bring up the debt collector template. You're just going to choose the fields from the left-hand side that you want and move them over to the right-hand side. Obviously, any that you don't need, you can just move back. If you want the column names to display the values in the selected fields box in the output file, then you want to make sure that you've got the display column names checked. So the big thing about this is usually when you're sending to an outside collection agency, they're going to want this information. They want the social security number, they want driver's license. This is usually required. So having these fields set in the debt collector template actually does allow the data to be decrypted when it's exported. And there's, you know, only like in NorthStar, the only other place you can really do that is Query Manager. So, you know, if you've got a big list that you're sending to a collection agency, you don't want to go through 50 accounts to, you know, put the decrypted information in. So having this set up in the template will just decrypt that information in the output file. So the other thing too is you've got output formats, you've got comma, there's comma, tab, semicolon, and pipe. So the different formats available. You set the desired date format that you want, and then once you've done all that, you're just going to click save. And at that point, you can now use that CSV tab in the debt collector setup window to export the data, and it's going to be create an output file with all the configurations you've done in that collector template. So yeah, you would just return to the debt collector screen, go to the CSV tab. You're just going to obviously select the collector you want to export and just save that in your preferred location. And then this is just an example, an internal example of what it looks like when you've exported that data. So it just makes things a little easier to if you're looking to assign to an outside agency. All right. Anybody have any questions? You do have the ability to, so you do have the ability to assign alerts, pop-up alerts to the account. You will have a soft alert, what's called a soft alert, that is in the blue bar above the account number in account gateway that will say the debt collector, like debt collector 3 or debt collector 1, whichever one they are sitting in. But you do have the ability to assign alerts as well. Yeah.
Ask the online. It doesn't look like there's any questions yet. Last chance for online folks. Going once, going twice. All right. Okay. Thank you, Janice. That was a lot to go.
You need some water now.